Hello, today I will be talking about how good environmentalists are holists, evaluating the dispute between individualism and holism. In this presentation, I will begin by laying out the key terms for full understanding. I will then be identifying the goal of what good environmentalism is. I will then be setting up the case for land ethics as the solution, and finally I will investigate the shortcomings of anthropocentric theories. Settling this dispute between what ethical theory can lead to the best environmental guidance and outcome is crucial in moving forward collectively. The International Panel on Climate Change is a leading resource for evaluating the current conditions related to climate change and assessing what viable options are available to us as people. Their three pillars of climate change are prevention, mitigation, and adaptation. Prevention is off the table. With the life cycle of carbon allowing it to stay in the atmosphere for potentially 200 years, mitigation seems to be holding on by a thread, if still possible at all. This leaves adaptation, and where land ethics theory can best guide that process. The individualistic attitudes that have brought us to this crucial tipping point cannot suddenly pivot and provide a way out of climate change, but adapting to a holistic approach could. Here is the guiding question I chose to respond to. Critically evaluate the dispute between individualism and holism. Do you have to be a land ethicist to be a good environmentalist? Do individualistic theories necessarily fail to satisfy the aims of environmentalism? Or is it possible to extend an individualistic theory to account for those aims? My thesis for this presentation is that yes, good environmentalists are land ethicists. The first important distinctions for this conversation include individualistic theory, which is a theory that puts individuals at the center of moral concern, which goes hand in hand with anthropocentric or anthropocentrism, which means to be human-focused. In direct opposition to both of these is holistic theory, which puts ecosystems at the center of moral concern. Anything that is holistic is also non-anthropocentric, meaning that it is not solely focused on humans. Anthropocentric theories that are often used in this conversation include utilitarianism, deontology, virtue ethics, and teleology. These are all individualistic theories that center around what is right for the individual being. The non-anthropocentric theory is the land ethics theory, which believes that the right action is whatever preserves the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community as a whole. The last key term is the tragedy of the commons. The tragedy of the commons is the depletion of a shared resource by individuals acting for their own benefit over the interests of the community. Good environmentalism is the long-term collective action towards the betterment of the environment for now and for future generations. Long-term collective action looks like the sustained collaboration between individuals, communities, and nation-states to share resources for the betterment of the environment. It is important to qualify good environmentalism as long-term effort given what we know about the longevity of pollutants in our world. Both of these are photos from Ecuador, who has been putting collective action to practice in many ways. The first is with reforestation efforts of the Amazon rainforest. The people of Ecuador recognize the need not only for a volume of trees, but diversity of trees. They have broke a Guinness World Record for planting a combination of over 200 different species of native trees to help boost carbon sequestration from the atmosphere and redevelop native environments. On the right, you can see a photo of the Galapagos Islands. Locals routinely participate in beach cleanups to reduce the amount of plastics in and around Ecuador and the Galapagos Islands, with many organized events recovering 2.5 tons of plastic per event. The Galapagos Islands have long been revered for their biodiversity, and their efforts align with the goal of land ethics to preserve the stability and beauty of the ecosystems there. The reasons that an individualistic theory will fail the efforts of good environmentalism is laid out by land ethicist Mark Sagoff. His argument is as follows. That first, if individualism undermines collective action, causing the tragedy of the commons, underlying many environmental problems, then we must radically revise our culture towards holism. Individualism undermines collective action, causing the tragedy of the commons, underlying many environmental problems. Therefore, we must radically revise our culture towards holism. Premise 1 establishes that an individualism and holism cannot coexist in the long-term effort to be a good environmentalist to the planet. Individualism is inherently anthropocentric. Premise 2 shows that individualism does undermine collective action. At some point, an individual in an anthropocentric culture will be at odds with what is best for the welfare of the ecosystem. The culture of the other individualistic theories will justify harming the welfare of the ecosystem for the individual, leading to the tragedy of the commons and exasperating the environmental problems related. Finally, good environmentalism cannot be achieved when the culture allows a panic eject button out of collective action. Thus, the culture must be revised towards holism. Individualism can agree to collective action, but only in the short term. Individualistic theories thrive in cultures that inevitably produce competition, and the individual will pursue what is in their best interest over the collective. This is a point illustrated by Stephen Gardner in his paper, A Perfect Moral Storm. Gardner addresses the global storm of agents and nation-states through the prisoner's dilemma. Because of causes like institutional inadequacy and fragmentation of agency, there is always a better outcome associated with non-compliance for moral agents or nation-states. In a world of nation-states that understand the incentive of others to cheat in accordance with the prisoner's dilemma, the competition for finite resources before others can overconsume for themselves will cause conflicts over the distributions of those resources, furthering the tragedy of the commons. For example, from a utilitarian cost-benefit perspective, it was right for the United States to join the United Nations to support efforts to increase the well-being of the planet. But let's suppose that the UN passes a climate change accord, limiting and requiring the reduction of carbon emissions of nation-states based on individual attributes of the nation-states. The United States, by cost-benefit analysis, has no reason to invest in ways to accomplish this, when there is nothing the UN can do to intimidate or punish the United States into compliance. Embracing the culture of individualism, the US will defy the UN and encourages big businesses to reduce their emissions, but ultimately continues to emit without reduction. The negative effects on the planet from the United States in this scenario shows the tragedy of the commons. By putting the well-being of the US over the health of the planet, the shared resource is harmed. So in conclusion, good environmentalism requires a sustained commitment to collective action. Individual anthropocentric theories do not support this unwavering commitment. Holistic theories can achieve long-term collective action. Therefore, a cultural shift to holism, guided by the land ethic, is needed to be good environmentalists to the planet. Thank you for listening.